Everyone, thanks for joining. So today's session for enablement is around spatial analytics. So I do think that this is one of the more pertinent and important areas of the tool sets that my customers are using lately. So across my own customer base, I'm consistently hearing that there's a lot of dynamic planning going on. So a lot of folks that we are working with or potentially working with are getting pulled into a million different directions to do. Again, I would call it very dynamic planning and dynamic analysis as business requirements are constantly shifting to areas that maybe we didn't foresee a few months ago. I think one of the more interesting areas that as an Alteryx user, you should definitely understand in this sort of new dynamic world is around the spatial analysis tool set, just because of the nature of what's going on. So much of it has a geographic bent to it. So I'm pretty interested to see what Chris is going to show us today. Like I said, I certainly know within my own customer base, the geographic side of the house is pretty important. There is a ton of learning and depth that goes with the spatial tools. So I think, as always, I would orientate you guys to community.alteryx.com under Academy and the interactive lessons and that sort of thing. But certainly with spatial under the videos, I've got here spatial analytics for beginners, and you can kind of see some workflows there. Chris, I ask you, is there any other sort of resources that we should address now or later around folks that would want to get started on the spatial analytics, and both for maybe a beginner, and I see lots of folks here that are also intermediate that you'd recommend up front, or maybe you're going to cover that, but just wanted to kind of talk about those a couple of times up front.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The community is the place to go. I know that's where I started learning spatial. I don't come from a spatial background, but I feel that the more I work with Alteryx, the more I run into some spatial issues and the more videos I have to look at. So definitely there's quite a bit on community for videos and self-taught training.
Good stuff. Okay. I'm just going to hand it over to you if that's okay. Often I know we get lots of questions in the session. So I am going to stop sharing and promote you here, sir. And as always, guys, I think many of you are familiar faces here. Ask your questions in the chat. I'm monitoring them. Apologies if it takes a minute or two to get to it, or the Q&A as well. And we'll go from there. Yeah, I got lots of hellos. So hello, everyone. Good morning. All right.
And hello, everyone. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Looks like a couple folks can't hear us. Just checking. Can you guys put it in the chat, which is the little bubble? Can you guys hear us okay? If you are having audio issues, okay, you can hear us. Perfect. Thank you. If you are hearing audio issues, just sort of sort through the options. You might want to dial in, but certainly it is very likely something local to your computer. Your sound is being routed to maybe a rogue port. So, okay. Thanks, guys. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, then, so I'll get started. So today's session is about spatial and demographic analysis inside of Alteryx. So really what we're going to be doing today is I'll just do a quick overview of the upcoming trainings we have, such as this one, a little bit of the background of the workflow we're going to do, and I may or may not get to the support slide. But as always, your local SE, whoever that may be, they can always be contacted via your account executive, such as Mr. Peck here on the line, and he can put you in touch with a technical person that's responsible for your organization. And you can always contact technical support or post a question on the community, which we often see users do. Okay, so for upcoming trainings, we do have an Alteryx hands-on web workshop on the web this Wednesday, starting at 1 until 4. This is a session that will take you through a few beginner workflows, and talk to you about, some different tools inside your favorite menu item, or just some different processes that you probably do if you're starting out within Alteryx. And then the second half, so from from 1:30 to 4 is going to be, 2:30 to 4 is going to be the more intermediate session, which dives a little bit deeper into some more advanced topics inside of Alteryx. We do have a predictive modeling 203 dealing with time series coming up next Monday. And on the following Friday, we have a self-awareness session just for those beginners to understand more about what's inside of Alteryx.
Actually, Chris, sorry, I apologize. A quick commercial. There is something missing from there. So every Thursday, like I said, a lot of you, we understand are crunched for time and full hour-long commitments are tough. Every Thursday at both 8:45 a.m. Eastern and 8:45 a.m. Pacific, two different sessions. We have a 15-minute only tool mastery session that we run every week. So grab a coffee, 8:45 a.m. Pacific and Eastern. And it's a quick, super quick deep dive with Andy Main, who many of you know, on a specific tool. I think this week it's time series plotting. So quick, 15 minutes in and out. But I will put those links in the chat. You just have to register once. The registrations just come to us. It doesn't go to marketing or anything like that. But the registration allows you to register once and get all of the upcoming tool mastery sessions, and they're in your calendar. I'll put that in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, those are super handy. Just get a quick tool mastery series. And of course, the main man, Andy, is excellent at delivering those. Okay, so we talked about community already. Definitely a great place for you to go. Any kind of self-help learning action items you have, really good place. We even have guided beginner sessions on how to use the product as well. So for today's training, I thought what we would do for the Canadian customers on the line, we're going to use a popular coffee chain to understand where they are not that their competitors are. So really what we're going to do is we're going to start plotting all of our locations and then start plotting all of our competitors' location. And really the goal is to understand where we're not penetrating, where our competitor is. And we're also going to add in some demographic information, understand a little bit more about that area that we're not penetrating. So the topics we're going to cover today, we're going to use a Dun and Bradstreet input tool. We're going to use an allocate input tool to input some Statistics Canada information. We're going to create some points. We're going to do spatial match, and we're even going to use a buffer and the find nearest tool as well. So really today what we're talking about is we're talking about a few different tools and few different business packages that are add-ons to Alteryx Designer. So what we're looking at is we're going to look at some location insights data package, which provides Alteryx data for the TomTom data package, as well as we're going to look at the business insights package, which for the Canadian customers on the line includes Dun and Bradstreet for Canada, as well as Statistics Canada. And if you're in the US, you're lucky enough to get some Experian data as well, where it's a richer set of demographic information for individuals as well as areas. So today I'm going to be looking just at the Canadian Dun & Bradstreet, the business locations insights package, as well as the insights package. So really that popular coffee chain I was talking about is Tim Hortons, of course, and the competitor is Starbucks. So what we're going to do is we're going to load in a locations file for Tim Hortons. We're going to plot the points on a map, and we're going to create a trade area around each one of the stores for a 5 kilometer trade area. So I imagine we probably expect that Tim Hortons is everywhere in the country and that there's no region that's not going to be covered by them that a Starbucks is in. But what we're going to do as well is we're going to use the Dun& Bradstreet information, get all the Starbucks locations information. We're going to filter that just on Ontario. I just have Ontario locations for Starbucks or for Tim Hortons. We're going to find and match up where all the Tim Hortons locations are and Starbucks are not. We're going to match that up with some Statistics Canada information to understand more about that region. So I'm not just going to talk about it, we can build it out. So as Mike mentioned, if there's any questions, please post them in the chat. I'll pause every once in a while and see if there's any questions. But please post them to everyone so that Mike can read it, I can read it, everyone on the line can read it as well. And please don't just send it to myself. So we're gonna, yes.
Sorry, Hassan here. I do have a question, and the question is, how do we get the DNB Canadian dataset and allocate tools?
Okay, so what we have is we have inside of Alteryx, we have a business insights data package that you can purchase, which is going to provide you with a couple different databases for the Dun & Bradstreet, as well as provide you information from Stats Canada. So that is an add-on to the Alteryx Designer. And as I'm going through this, I will point out what is available not through what is available inside the designer with your regular license, and what is additional whenever you purchase the location or business insights package. The nice thing is that if you do require access to both the business insights and the location insights package, if you purchase the business insights package, it also includes the location insights package. And that's a lot of words that I just said now, so I'll dive deep. And thank you, Hassan. Glad to hear that you're on the line today. So the first thing we're going to do, guys, is we're going to do what we do normally inside an Alteryx Designer. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this is the Alteryx Designer. It's a Windows-based application that allows you to input data, access the data, prep that data, blend that data, and really get the insights out of it, and really a user-friendly interface. I'm not going to dig deep into the actual designer and how to use it itself. We're just going to walk through the more advanced capabilities of the geospatial analysis as well as the demographic analysis inside this session. So when I input a data file, I go out and it says connect to a file or a database. I'm going to go out and I can look at some recent data files I have. I can look at some saved database connections, and I can go out and browse. And as you see, our list of files that we're able to access is pretty deep, as well as the different data sources. So really, you should not have a problem connecting to your different data sources inside your organization. It should all be there ready for you to go. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a Tim's location CSV file. And what this is pulling back, and if you're interested, what I did was I really just web scraped the Ontario locations from the Tim Hortons website. So here I have the street address, the city, the postal code, the province, the latitude and longitude. So the first step here, if I want to do some geospatial analysis, is I want to start creating the points. Where's the centroid? Where do the longitude and latitude match up? So I can do that by the spatial tools menu item. And if you don't have that by default inside your Alteryx Designer, you can always click on here and choose to add, remove tools. Okay, and then here you can go down and you can select what tools, what tool groupings you want to have inside your designer. So here I'm going to drag in the create points, and these tools are available even if you don't have the locations insights package. So what this does is this is going out and it's automatically configuring my data set to read in the longitude, reading long, and the latitude, reading latitude. If my fields weren't called this, I could I can manually go in and choose which fields I wanted to point them to, the longitude, latitude. So as I mentioned, this is out of the box designer. I'm just going to add a browse tool to show you what this is going to pull up. So here what this has done is this has gone out and it's put a point on each one of my Tim Hortons locations in the province of Ontario. So the next step I want to do, so remembering that I want to understand where a Starbucks is that my covering. So here I'm going to go out and I'm going to create a trade area. So the trade area tool itself is really just going to create basically a ring, or a donut, if you like, in a certain radius around my location. So here's looking at my centroid. The centroid was developed by the create points, and I'm specifying a radius. So if I don't have the locations insights, I can choose to do kilometers, miles, whatever it need be. I can even put in meters, things like that, by putting in decimal points. And I can also choose, if I do have the locations insights, some drive time information from TomTom. But let's not do this at that point. At this point, let's just go with the radius of a 5 kilometer area. So just to put a browse after this, what we'll see here is it's taken each one of the points and it's basically drawn a little circle around each one of my points for a 5 kilometer radius. So we have overlapping stores, so two stores very close to each other here up in Kirkland. Uh, and the radius around each one is that 5 kilometer radius. No smarts involved here, just basically taken that store, that centroid, and drawn a circle of 5 kilometers around it. If I did want to get more advanced, I can do non-overlapping, I can split out, I can do spatial matches, polybuild processes, and things like that. Or I could use the business locations insights package to really figure out what the drive time is. So if the drive time, maybe I want to have a 5 minute drive time. 5 minute drive time at night is a lot different than a 5 minute drive time during the day. Well, at least it was before we were all quarantined at home. Okay, so the next step of this workflow is going to be, let's go out and pull in some information about Starbucks. So here we have a special category called Calgary. So Calgary is a special Alteryx database format. It's very highly indexed, so it can contain a lot of data. It can contain a lot of data and be pretty quick. And as you probably all are aware, Alteryx, or if you're not aware, a nice tidbit for you, Alteryx did start out as a geospatial organization, and they built Alteryx because they found that they were doing so much data prep to get to the geospatial analysis that they needed to do, and hence that's why it's called AlterYX. So just a little tidbit for you. Maybe that's going to be on the advanced certification exam. I'm not sure. So here I'm going to use a Calgary input. And the different options I have based on what I have installed on my machine are I can look at some TomTom information, the addresses, but what I really want to get after is this DMB CA analytical data set. So for my friends in the US, you'd have a DMB US analytic data set that you could take advantage of there. So here what this gives us is it gives us quite a few different fields. What kind of information do I want to pull in? You know, what are the Alteryx data fields? What are the CAS? CAS we'll use heavily. This is the standardization of different fields, different names. So you may have something like Ontario spelled out inside your province. What the CAS will do, the CAS tool converts it to the standard abbreviation of ON. Maybe you have PQ or QUE for Quebec. I never know which is the abbreviation, but it'll convert it to the standard format that you want. So we will be using the CAS tools here shortly. So what we want to do is we want to understand, okay, what are the locations of all the Starbucks inside Canada? So here I'm just going to choose on the business name, and I'm going to choose field, and I'm just going to type in Starbucks. So what this is going to do is it's going to filter the data set based on where the business name is equal to Starbucks. Now, this may be the query you need to have for your data set, or you may need to refine it a little bit. When we look at the results of the output of the Dun & Bradstreet CA data file, what I see is an Alteryx zero-base ID, the Dun & Bradstreet Canadian ID, the business name. So the business name does change. Sometimes the business may be registered at Starbucks, Starbucks Coffee, Canada Incorporated. You know, if you're in the US, maybe it's going to be some different names. What we have here as well is the trade style name, the state, province, country code, DMB country codes, and all the codes that are associated with that. We have some mailing list information. We also have some really interesting information where we start looking at the sales volume in the local currency or in US dollars, and we have a reliability code. So how reliable is that going to be? So this may be something you want to look at whenever you start focusing more on the DMB data set. So really what I like to consider the Dun & Bradstreet data set really good for is it's going to give you a quick hit. It's going to give you a quick understanding of what your competitors are doing or what other businesses in the area are doing. So it's augmenting the data that you may have inside of your organization. And you can even use the DMB to start querying your own organization per se. So we have quite a few different fields, you know, legal names, but what I'm really after is the latitude and longitude, as well as what we do get is we get a spatial object as well. So the spatial object itself is really going to be that point. So it's where the longitude and latitude meet up. Same thing we created up here inside this create points. So I'm just going to add in a select tool to filter down the number of columns that we're pulling in. Zoom in here a little bit. Just from the options, I'm going to select, I'm going to deselect all, and I'm going to just expand the field names. And let's say I want to get the DMB name, the business name, maybe I want to have the city name, street, or whatever. But what I'm really after here is maybe the sales volume, local currency, the employees total. And then I want to go down, I want to get that latitude, longitude, latitude, longitude, and then down at the bottom, I want to go out and get that spatial object. And we also want to get, I'm going to rely on the standardized postal code, the province, the city, to start doing some kind of matching if need be. So now when I run this workflow, what we get back here is we get back a short list of the data set to understand more about where that Starbucks is, possibly how much the location is generating revenue, and the employees total, for example. So next thing, because I know my locations inside my Tim Hortons data set are only for Ontario. There's no reason for me to be pulling in more information from the DMB. So we're just going to add in a filter tool to the data set to say where the CAS province is equal to ON. So now when we run this, we can see what's coming back here. I'm looking at 430 locations in Ontario, and there's 771 that are not inside Ontario. So now I have my Tim Hortons trade area of 5 kilometers. So now let's do a spatial match based on those spatial objects where that Starbucks is. I'm going to match it up with the Tim Hortons location. And so maybe I'll pause there before I do that. Any questions that have come up in the chat that need to be addressed?
No, Chris, we're good.
So from the spatial tools, what we also have is we have this tool called the spatial match. And again, this is inside of Alteryx, the standard license that you have to begin with. So what I want to find is I want to find the Starbucks locations. So I'm going to drag my Ontario Starbucks locations to the target input of the spatial match. And I'm going to drag my trade area of my Tim Hortons locations to the universe. So what this tool is going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to inspect target input. Did I not include that spatial object? I did not include the spatial object. So what the input of the spatial match tool needs is it needs spatial objects. Okay, so it found from my universe, which is the Tim Hortons locations, it found two spatial objects. It found that centroid, but what I really want is I want that trade area because I want to understand what Tim Hortons or what Starbucks are located within a 5 kilometer radius of the Starbucks. However, I did not include, I thought I did check it on, I did not include the spatial object inside the Dun & Bradstreet dataset for the Starbucks locations. So I'll run this, and then I'll modify this to include that spatial object here. And now if we look at the results, what we'll find is the spatial match is matching based on the centroid of the Starbucks as well as 5 kilometers. I can find all the locations that matched up and ones that didn't match up. So in this case, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for all the Starbucks that don't have a Tim Hortons within 5 kilometers. So what has come back here is it's come back with 7 different locations that say, okay, this Starbucks here, I'm not able to match up. When we look over at the data set itself, I can see that I'm missing some spatial objects. So these spatial objects, I want to be completing these. So for some reason, the Dun & Bradstreet wasn't able to generate a spatial object based on the latitude and longitude. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually create a spatial point for the Starbucks where it's missing. And how I can do that is I can use a formula tool to create the spatial object. So here I'm going to pull down the formula tool, and I'm just going to put this after my filter. I don't need to add the formula or add the centroid to each one of my locations. I just need to add it to the province of Ontario. So what I'm going to do within my formula tool is we're going to go out and we're going to select that spatial object because I want to update the spatial object where it's null. So here, the formula is just going to be if is null spatial object. Then go out and create a point. So from the formulas tool, we have quite a few different spatial objects. We have, you can create your area, your boundary, your centroid, etc. But what I want to do is I want to create a point. So I'm going to go out and create a point using the standard spatial tool called create points. My x-axis is going to be my longitude, and y is the latitude. And I just need to end the if, else. So if the spatial object is matching, then create a point based on the longitude and latitude, else use the existing spatial object, and the if. So all this is doing, and I'm showing you this example to show you that you can use formula tools inside of Alteryx to format or create different spatial objects or do different types of operations. The same as what you could do using the different spatial tools that are packaged together by Alteryx. So now I'm just going to put browses on the spatial match tool, and let's have a look at what we got. So now what's happened is it matched up all 7 of those, or it matched up 5 out of the 7, and it's left me here with um, two locations that are not matching up. So what this is telling me here is that for some reason inside the Blue Mountains and Wasaga Beach, I don't have a Tim Hortons within 5 kilometers of a Starbucks. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to start understanding this a little bit more. Okay, why, maybe not so much why don't we have a location there, but let's understand a little bit more about the demographics from the Blue Mountains and Wasaga Beach. So before I move on, what we've done here is we loaded in a Tim Hortons file. We created the points based off the longitude, latitude, and then we added a 5 kilometer trade area around that Tim Hortons location. The next thing we did was we pulled in all the Starbucks locations for Ontario, corrected some of the data to create a spatial object, and then we did a match. So the match tool itself, what that's doing is that's going out and it's saying, all right, for each one of the Starbucks locations, match up where there's a Tim Hortons within 5 kilometers of that location. And then I can look at the match. So the majority of my Tim Hortons are within a yes, the majority of Starbucks in Ontario do have a Tim Hortons within 5 kilometers. However, there were 2 locations that do not. So now the next step we want to do is we want to understand a little bit more about the demographics and understand, is it worth it for us to put a Tim Hortons location near these? Or maybe what we want to do is we want to find out what are the nearest stores and how far away are they from these different locations. So let's do that first, actually. So what we're going to do is we're going to use another spatial tool, and these spatial tools, they come with your standard license of Alteryx. I'm going to go out and do a find nearest. So the find nearest tool is going to find the nearest location for each one of the objects that I'm trying to match up with. So here I'm just going to drop this tool here, and from the universe what I want to do is I want to take my points for the Tim Hortons, and my target is going to be from each one of the unmatched. So to configure the tool, all we're saying here, spatial input, I'm going to use the spatial object for the target and the centroid. How many kilometers do I want to find? How far away? How many of the nearest points do I want to find? Do I want to find 1 location, 2 locations, 20? I can enter in as many as I want. Do I want to ignore 0 distance matches, which means that if it's right on top of it, do I want to ignore it? Maybe something's wrong with my data. But really what I want to do is I want to start understanding a little bit more about what Tim Hortons locations are the closest to the Starbucks where I do not have a coverage for. We'll just add up browse tools here and run the workflow. So now if I look at the match, what it's done here is it's pointed out each one. So let's have a look at the map. Look at the map to visually see where the different locations are. So the red in this case is going to be the Starbucks location. And the green is that Tim Hortons location. So here, the closest one that I found was out here in Stayner or something, and I'm actually from this region, so that's how I know. And then I have one in downtown Collingwood, but I have a Starbucks up at Blue Mountains, and that's not within the 5 kilometer radius. Looking at the data, what we can see is we can see that location, and we can see how far away the Tim Hortons is. So if I was to increase my trade area to 7 kilometers, then they would all be matched. Then all the Starbucks in Ontario have a Tim Hortons within 5 kilometers. Okay? So that's an easy way for me to understand, what the closest locations are. So maybe I'd actually want to increase the capacity for each one of these Tim's locations, or maybe I want to do some more marketing inside the locations where those Starbucks are to then start directing people more towards my closest Tim Hortons location. So now to understand a little bit more about Collingwood and Stainer in this case, what we can do is we can do a little bit of an input to pull in some demographic information. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to use the allocate input. So this is using the Business Insights data package. So when I load this up, what I can look at is I can look at some Canadian data, Canadian Statistics, Stats Canada information. I can look at the different geographies of Canada. I can go out and pick some different variables. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to understand a little bit more about the age characteristics using Stats Canada 2011. Maybe I want to know what is the average age of all the people, what is the highest population density per age group. I can do all that. Maybe I want to start understanding a little bit more about the population density of that area. Maybe there's not enough people there for me to really put a location. Um, Maybe we want to understand more about the population itself and total dwellings. So what I'm going to look at as well is I'm going to pick a specific area. So in this case, I'm going to go out and I'm going to choose the Canadian metropolitan area and just choose Ontario, because my whole analysis at this point is just for Ontario. And this will save me a little bit later on to go out and pull back that information or to filter that information based on the province. So now when I run this workflow, what we're going to get back here from the allocate input is each one of the different metro areas, some different information about, what the population densities are and things like that, just to show you very quickly what kind of information we are pulling back. I'm going to add a select tool here. And what we do get is from the information, we get the description of what the code actually means from the allocate input. So here we can see that the A008 is actually total population by age groups, and then it breaks it down by 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, etc. And we also have some different information about the total mean age of the area, male, female breakdowns, and then some population density information here down at the bottom. And it also provides a spatial object, luckily enough, because we will have to use that spatial object to do the join back or to understand what is the demographic information for that area based on that spatial match that we want to be looking at. So this data set is provided with the Business Insights package. It provides, same as with the DMB information, it provides just an easy way for us to go get the geography specific information and the different variables based on the different data set. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add in a little bit of a buffer. So actually, let's just put in a spatial match tool. So again, we're going to use the spatial match tool to match up based on the unmatched values. So those two locations, I want to know more information about that. Oh, that's a combine tool I dropped in there. So the spatial match tool, I'm going to take from the two locations that I don't have that Tim Hortons there. I'm going to add that into my target, and my universe is actually going to be the area, that metro area that I'm looking for. So now to configure this tool, the output from the T will be that spatial object. The universe will be the spatial object. And what I want to do here is I want to match where it's within the universe. So now if I run this workflow, what we're going to see here is that I have 0 matches. So if you remember earlier, what I did was we looked at the universe was actually a trade area. So it was something with inside that trade area of 5 kilometers. So it is able to easily match up based on a broader area. What we're looking at right now with this spatial tool is we're looking at 2 points. Okay, so we're looking at a point of the metropolitan area as well as a point from the different area. Actually, is that even true? Let's take a look and see what we're getting from the allocate input. Now, if I run this, every time I put a browse on an output that has a spatial tool, it does provide me with that link. So what I can see here is that the spatial object for the area is the actual metro area. It's not a point. So why didn't they match? It didn't match because what I have here is if I'm looking at my input area, I'm not seeing a metro area for Wasaga Beach or for the Blue Mountains. So really what I want to do is I want to increase the metro area for each one of the spatial objects. So instead of creating a trade area, what we can do is we can use a buffer tool. So the buffer tool comes out of the box as well from Alteryx. You don't need any special license to use that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a buffer on top of the stats Canada information. We're going to choose the spatial object and we're going to create a buffer. Let's go with, say, 5 kilometers as well. So now let's put a browse after the buffer tool. So now what we'll see is we see a bigger area for each one of the different regions. So what this has done is just taken the metropolitan area and just increased the size of it. So I could have theoretically chosen not metropolitan areas, but a federal electoral district from the allocate input tool. I could have went down to a census tract, which is probably going to be more detail. Each one of these is a different census tract, and this is all based on the Stats Canada information in this case. So what we've done here is we've taken each one of these central metropolitan areas and increased the size by 4 or 5 kilometers. And now I need to modify the spatial object spatial match tool to not use that object, but to use the buffer. And here we want to say again where the target is within the universe. Run the workflow. So now when I look at the match, I see that I have one that's matched up and one that has not matched up. So in this case, I'm not able to find demographic information for this Wasaga Beach area location, but I was able to find demographic information about the Collingwood or Blue Mountains location. So then I can start doing some analysis to understand more about, is it really feasible or should I be looking at that area as a potential place for a store to be located? So a lot of different things we went through here. Just to reiterate, this last piece was to go out and use the business insights package to go out and get some information about a metropolitan area, looking at the variables and age characteristics, as well as some Stats Canada information about the population density, population, as well as total private dwellings. Then from here, what we did was we joined that up with our unmatched locations to understand a little bit more about the different information about the regions where we're not being covered or where we're not having coverage for our location. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions that have come up in the chat. I feel like I went through this very quickly.
Yeah, we're good so far. I mean, one question there, Chris, maybe at the end, just a quick recap on which tools come with Designer and which are separate? Because there were a few questions around that. Either do that now, just as a quick recap.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. So basically, when we're talking about, let's start back up here. When we're talking about the spatial tools, all these spatial tools come with Alteryx. If I look at a spatial tool such as the trade area or the buffer zone or the buffer, what you do get with the locations insight package is you get access to TomTom. So TomTom is going to provide you different drive times as well as it's going to provide you different maps that you can look at. So whenever I click on an output view of an output that has a spatial object, what you're going to have is you're automatically going to have the Alteryx maps. But what you also get with the spatial, with the locations insight package is the TomTom maps, as well as these USGS North American maps as well. So the idea here is that out of the box, what you'll get is you will get all the spatial tools and the Alteryx maps, but what you will not get is you'll not get the TomTom engine for the drive time information or the maps. As far as looking at Dun and Bradstreet information, that requires the Business Insights data package. So that's going to give you information about different businesses. It will also give you, I believe, a business match tool, and it gives you address information as well. This is more for the location insights, but it'll give you the demographic information to pull back the stats can, or the different geographic regions that you need inside of your analysis. And this is really for the Canadian data set. We're talking about Dun& Bradstreet for Canada as well as stats can for Canada. For the US, you're getting Dun& Bradstreet for the US. You're getting the Experian data as well as the census information for the US. So a little bit richer if you're an American client, and also quite a bit bigger. I think the data package itself is a gig or something, maybe even more, probably more nowadays of information. So the idea here is that whenever you do purchase these products, these business add-ons, locations, and business insights, what you're getting is you're getting the ability to augment or enhance, enrich your data inside of Alteryx. But as far as doing your geospatial analysis, you have all these tools out of the box, and all you need is a lat and long to start working with the data itself. So this is really the demonstration I put together for you today. So happy to answer any other questions that may have come up. But the idea here really is that we took a data set with latitude and longitude, we enriched it to pull back some more information about the different sales information of that Starbucks location that I don't have coverage for, where it is. In this case, it's up in the Blue Mountains area, and maybe I want to understand a little bit more and start doing a further analysis based on the demographic information of that location to put a Starbucks or to put a Tim Hortons right beside the Starbucks at Blue Mountain.
Okay, good stuff. Any questions, folks? We'll keep the line open for a couple of minutes here. And as I mentioned, community is a good place to investigate this, and the amount of use cases are as you can imagine, fairly varied. If you've got, I would say, call it kind of real estate data or asset data that's in the field, geolocation type data, whether those are fixed assets. A lot of you work with linear assets in systems such as Maximo and SAP, etc. But also we see a lot of work on the financial side as folks are analyzing tax codes for various counties and ensuring that receipts and various tax provisions are applied correctly. There is a very good use case on Chick-fil-A, everyone's favorite chicken sandwich, on their tax group and how they took the spatial tools and massively automated an audit that happened in North Carolina. I forget how many, 10 million or 12 million receipts they had to analyze, and they did it in very short order. after they were audited to ensure that various tax provisions by county were applied correctly. So this is a pretty powerful tool depending on the use case. And so, yeah, we'll just leave it open for any questions. Otherwise, guys, we appreciate your time. I will, in the background, find a copy of that while we keep it open here for a second. Alteryx. I think this is it. Okay, no questions, Chris. Good job. Appreciate it.
Okay, this was it was a lot quicker than what I thought it was going to be initially. So I just put up some support resources. So as always, we can't talk about this enough. The Alteryx community, some training resources, and of course, technical support or your sales engineer is always happy to help out. We love getting the phone calls.
Love them. Yeah, good stuff. Okay. All right, I think with that, we'll let you guys go. So appreciate your time. Have a good week, everyone. And as a reminder, so Wednesday, we've got hands-on workshops, beginner and intermediate. And we've got the tool mastery sessions, which I've put in the chat for just 15 minutes. Obviously, optional attendance. Just if you register for them, I think there's a radio button to get the actual calendar invite sent to you. I think you do have to click that option, just so you know. So have a good week, everyone. Thanks.